To Secretary Toland, I'll introduce you here in a minute, but thanks again for always being so willing to take time to connect and engage with our membership. I think it's important that as you all make decisions on the state level, that you account for Wyandotte County. You absolutely do that. So thank you so much for always taking the time to be with us.
I'm really glad to be here, Daniel, and I appreciate the invitation. And I think this may be a rescheduling of the forum that was going to happen in January or February, and we got snowed out. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. So thanks for coming back to the forum. Also want to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors who help and continue to support our chamber, and to our members for continually engaging with us. If you've not been to our COVID resource page, please do so. Also make sure to follow us on Facebook and all social media platforms. And so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Secretary of Commerce, David Toland, who will give us an update on all the things happening at the Department of Commerce. And Secretary Toland, I think you're going to get some questions around the Ad Astra plan and the 1.5 phase. And just, we'd love to hear some updates from your end. So thanks again for joining us. Turn it over to you, Secretary Toland.
All right. Thank you, Daniel, and thanks to everybody who is on the call today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be back. And as Daniel said, we've really worked hard to make sure that we are communicative, and that we're good listeners, and that we're responsive to needs across the state, and particularly in Wyandotte County. You know, our partners there, the Chamber, Greg, at the UG, everybody has been so helpful and supportive, and it's really nice when folks are rowing in the same direction. So we're grateful for that. Thought what I would do today is start with some updates on how Federal CARES Act money that has gone out is being administered, and next go to what we've been doing at Commerce in terms of trying to address challenges in specific sectors. And then really I want to leave the most time for Q&A, and I'll do my best to answer all the questions that you have. As always, if I don't know the answer, we will take those down. I've got staff with me here in the room who are appropriately socially distant, but who will be taking notes on questions that we can't answer and tracking down that information, and then we'll send it to Daniel so he can get it out to the membership. So talking first about the CARES Act and the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. Just to give a little bit of context here, PPP, there's been $679 billion allocated for that, which makes it just $23 billion shy of the size of the entire Department of Defense budget for last year. So it is absolutely massive, and it's gone through SBA, which is a relatively small, minor federal agency. It's been extraordinary, the amount of money that's passed through that agency. Kansas has done very well in terms of getting PPP dollars. And a lot of that is due to the fact that our banking community has really stepped up. And, you know, you look at, I was talking with a banker this morning who worked all the way through Easter, worked a 16-hour day on Easter Sunday, working to get their customers' PPP applications into the system. We've seen stories like that across the state. And as a result, in the first round of PPP, Kansas was in the top 10 of states nationally in terms of number of PPP loans per capita, and our average loan size was higher than surrounding states, and we've done extremely well. At this point, about $5.1 billion has been injected into the state's small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's a lot of money, but it also goes to underscore just how deep the need is in these small businesses across the state. We're very hopeful that that this has had the kind of impact that we need in terms of being able to stem some of the severity of the layoffs. Though, as you know, the number of layoffs across the state has been worse than any of us have seen in our lifetimes, or frankly, in our parents' lifetimes. There is another program that is part of the CARES Act. It already existed, but has been juiced up significantly through the CARES Act, and that's the EIDL program, Economic Injury Disaster Loans. That program has not been as popular as PPP because the lion's share of that money does have to be repaid just as any conventional loan. And so you've got a 4 3/4 interest rate on those loans. The only portion of an EIDL loan that is forgivable as a grant is the first $10,000 that is provided there. So otherwise, this is just a regular loan. We have seen, though, 21,000 EIDL loans that have been done in the state of Kansas for a value of about $70 million. So our state small businesses have been using this program, just not in the kind of numbers that we've seen with PPP. I thought I might give some updates by sector in the state, starting first with manufacturing, which of course is a mainstay of Kansas City and Wyandotte County economy, and really our state economy as a whole. So if you go back to the month of February, pre-COVID, there were 166,000 manufacturing jobs in the state of Kansas. We have lost 59,000 of those since that time. Now, when I say lost, we're talking about furloughs, we're talking about layoffs. We're very hopeful that many of those are going to come back. But as of right now, we've lost 59,000 of those jobs. That includes 3,000 manufacturing jobs last week alone. So we're working very aggressively with manufacturers across the state to help them retool in response to COVID and in response to other business opportunities that have been created. So that means, you've seen examples like Cobalt Boats in Neodesha has their upholstery team crafting surgical gowns for hospitals. You've got Textron Aviation in Wichita, which is making face shields. You've got distilleries across the state that have started making hand sanitizer. So there have been a lot of those companies that have worked to pivot to take advantage of both a need nationally and in the state and a business opportunity. So at Commerce, we have been working very hard to make sure that we can provide some immediate cash to support those acquisitions that are needed in order to retool. And so we're really proud of our team that's worked statewide, one-on-one with these manufacturers to help them get what they need. We're also really pleased with the work that's been done by Kansas Manufacturing Solutions, KMS, working with BioKansas to develop an inventory of Kansas companies that either currently craft or produce PPE and other critical needs items, or that would like to shift into those lines of work. And so for the first time, we have an inventory of that. It's been put together very quickly and at a high level of quality. And so that's going to be key as we look to, not the immediate, but what comes next in the recovery. How do we rebuild our economy in this state so that it is stronger and so that it is supercharged, particularly as it relates to the kind of sluggish economic growth that we saw over the last decade. So what we cannot have happen in Kansas is a repeat of the recovery from the last recession. So if you look from 2009 to 2019, the Kansas economy grew at about 0.8% annually. The national economy grew at twice that rate annually. And if you look at our surrounding states, our peer states, they all outpaced us in terms of economic growth. We can't let that happen again. We are not going to let that happen again. We are trying to make sure that we put in place the groundwork so that Kansas manufacturers and our entire economy can come back stronger and that we can outpace not just our peer states, but the nation as a whole and really be the comeback state, the model for how you can see a strong economic recovery after COVID. Talking more, just give another snapshot on hospitality. So we've seen close to 40,000 job losses across the state in the hospitality sector. This was the sector that was hit first and that has been hit incredibly hard. So, You look at restaurants, bars, lodging establishments, and event centers. As you know, Department of Commerce launched the Hire Fund a couple of months ago. That's something we put together in about 72 hours. And we had $5 million out the door within 6 days. And that's in loans that went to 346 hospitality businesses statewide, and in an average loan amount of about $15,000. And so that has helped to shore up some of the job losses in the hospitality sector, as has PPP, as has the EIDL program through the CARES Act. But the fact remains that our restaurants are still hurting, our lodging establishments and event centers are still hurting, and we got a long ways to go. Part of what's going to be key here is consumer behavior. So, we aren't clear yet what it's going to take so that people are comfortable again with resuming their Taco Tuesday habit with their family and going out to a restaurant or getting pizza on Friday night. People's habits have been changed temporarily, and we don't know what the new normal will be once we get to that stage. And so we're watching very closely to see what the trends are in the hospitality sector. We work closely with Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association to understand what's going on with their members and figure out ways that we can help. As you know, we've gotten pretty creative, particularly as it relates to, by Kansas standards on liquor laws. And so being able to have curbside cocktails and the like, we have really loosened up in response to these needs, which are profound, particularly with our eating and drinking establishments. So we think that's helpful, but we got a long way to go before we're out of the woods with the hospitality sector. Let me give you some good news. So as many of you are aware, we've been in a rebuilding mode at the Department of Commerce. When I came in, Governor Kelly and I came in a year and 4 months ago. The business recruitment apparatus for the state of Kansas has been largely dismantled. Where we once had recruiters in all of our key markets around the country, much of that had been taken apart over the last several years. So priority one for us was rebuilding our domestic recruitment team and our international business recruitment team. That is starting to pay dividends for us. So we've filled our position on the West Coast. So we now have a Kansas recruiter in Los Angeles who covers the Western states. We now have a top-notch person in Chicago who covers the Great Lakes region. We've got the East Coast covered again by somebody in New York. We've got Dallas covered by Alicia Hutchings, who was here before and who's now the head of our business recruitment team. And we've got the Mid-Central states covered by Chang Liu, who was already on the team, but who's now based out of Springfield, Missouri. And so we have a full bench, finally, in business recruitment. Here's why that matters. So we spent last year doing a lot of really unglamorous, unsexy work that needed to be done to get that system set back up, to get top-notch talent. If you look at our numbers, from March 1 to May 1 of last year, we opened 13 new economic development projects. That's last year. If you look at the same period this year, we have opened 36 new open economic development projects. And so you think about that, and some of that is because of the fact that a lot of companies see opportunities now, and these are Kansas companies that are expanding, that are adding new lines in response to COVID. But the other part of this is simply that we've got a team that's out hustling for new projects for the state, that's making the case for why Kansas is the place you should be investing. That has been particularly helpful to us as we look at reshoring. So companies across the country have seen their supply chains disrupted as a result of COVID. And that means in many cases that they have got to do something else. We want to make sure that that something else is bringing portions of that supply chain back to the United States and specifically to Kansas. We are a lower cost labor market within the United States as compared to the coasts. And so if I'm a company in New Jersey who's seen my supply chain from China disrupted, it's probably more likely that you would want to look at a lower cost state when you're bringing that back versus trying to bring that operation to New Jersey or to New York. Those are simply more expensive places in which to operate. So we think that Kansas, because of our workforce, because of our central location, because of the infrastructure that we have, that we are really well positioned to take advantage of reshoring opportunities that are happening as a result of COVID. So our business recruitment team is out hustling on that, as is our international team. So our international had been almost entirely dismantled. We were down to 2 staff when I took over. We're up to 5 now, and we're continuing to grow. And that's because it's been a priority that we get back in the game on international trade and foreign direct investment. And so there are a lot of opportunities right now. And I know that isn't the message that you hear, and all of us are very much focused, as we should be, on the crisis that we have in front of us right now. We've got a lot of businesses that are suffering profoundly, a lot of people suffering profoundly, and I don't want to minimize any of that. Our first priority is always existing Kansas businesses. But what I want you to know is that while we've got much of our agency mobilized to do that type of blocking and tackling for existing Kansas businesses, we've also got our recruiters out hustling for new business and making the case for why Kansas is a place to invest. And so I hope that can give you a little bit of a bright spot and make you, feel a little better about where we are and certainly where we're headed. So you will hear more in the month of June about some major project announcements that have been successful. And you will be hearing about the reshoring initiative, which will be a centerpiece of our strategy as a state as we work to rebuild our economy. I could go through the list of other things the department has done, but I think probably the best use of our time is simply to take questions, though I've got plenty of material that can make the case for how we've pivoted as a department. I'm going to be sending Daniel also a list that we sent to the legislature, which is an update on the Department of Commerce's activities. I want to say how grateful we are for our local partners and our team at Commerce. We can only do our work if we're working in partnership, and we have done that. We certainly strive to do that and to have created that culture, and we hope that you feel that on the local level. So with that, I would be very happy to take questions or comments that anyone has.
Thank you, Secretary. Folks, if you'd like to just drop your questions in the chat box, we'd appreciate that. We will also open up the floor for questions. Secretary, my question, I'm going to kick things off. Can you give us an update on, the Reopen Kansas plan and how that's going and how you all are collecting data on the progress of that plan?
Yes. So the focus of the Kelly administration has been to ensure that we have a balance between first protecting public health, but also working to support our economy and to ensure that we are considering all the factors of our decisions. And so that focus has also included a lot of research, both into what is the best medical evidence and best medical approaches that are warranted right now. And if you look to history and how pandemics have been handled in our country and what has worked in the past, both to contain the public health crisis and to bring economies back. If you go back to the 1918 Spanish flu that struck around the world and killed millions of people, you can look at how different cities and states handled working to contain that outbreak. And by and large, those communities and states that were aggressive about containment measures early on wound up being in much better shape economically after the pandemic had ended. And that was because you still had people to be able to own and operate and work in businesses. You had healthier communities. So you had, frankly, more people who were in better shape. And so those economies rebounded much faster when they were thoughtful and aggressive about making sure that the public health crisis before us was addressed. And so as an administration, we have worked to strike that balance between public health and the economy. And so what you see in the governor's reopening plan is an attempt to get things reopened again, but in a safe and science and data-driven way. So we're now entering phase 1.5, and the governor announced last night how that's going to work. And essentially, some highlights of that are that the cosmetology sector can reopen, but with clients coming by appointment. So the idea is not to have full waiting areas, but rather that somebody comes in, they've got cosmetologists, hairstylists, and the like that have the appropriate personal protective equipment, and they get the clients get the services they need. And it'll be done on an appointment basis. And so that's how that sector will reopen. 1.5 does continue to keep closed community centers, entertainment venues with a capacity of 2,000 or more, fairs, festivals, and parades, swimming pools, summer camps, and organized sports facilities, tournaments, and practices. Those are activities where it is difficult to maintain social distancing, where it's and where the environments are more conducive to the spread of COVID, and so those do remain closed. But at this point, we've got most businesses now have been able to reopen, with the exception of bars and nightclubs that, though we exclude the curbside and carry-out services that they provide, casinos, and indoor leisure spaces. So other than that, we are largely in a more open phase of our economy, and we think one that balances public health with the needs of businesses and our economy as a whole.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a question from Dan Erler. He's got a few. I'm just going to read the first one. Do you have plans on how to implement contact tracing in the community, and how do you plan on accessing and using testing data to support these efforts?
That's a good and important question. And it's one that, as Secretary of Commerce, I don't know the medical side, frankly, all that well on what the plan is on how contact tracing works. Secretary Norman at KDHE does, and we will reach out to him now and get information on what that plan is and send it to Daniel. And Daniel, if you would share it with the membership, we'd appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's give I think Rebecca James had a question here towards the bottom. So let me just scroll on down. What is the state actually doing to prioritize existing Kansas businesses, i.e., example, improving access to credit?
So, well, a number of things. So depending on sector, so if we're talking about manufacturing, we've made available our job creation fund to help those businesses pivot, as I mentioned earlier, into producing new product lines. So that's a cash fund that we have deployed across the state for a variety of businesses. There's the $5 million that we spent at Commerce on the hospitality sector through the the higher loan fund. There's a proposal that is likely to be considered next week by the legislature that relates to state idle funds and taking $60 million from that that would be provided to the banking community so that they could then make loans to small businesses across the state. I don't know whether that will go or not. May 21st, the legislature comes back for one day. And so there's a lot that's on the agenda for that one day. And I don't know whether that'll go anywhere or not, but there's been a lot of discussion about that. We've also worked to make sure through Commerce and through our partners that we are providing technical assistance to businesses that need help. So we've set up an online chat feature through kansascommerce.gov that's staffed every day by 12 different commerce staff that we have trained on the mechanics of PPP loans, EIDL loans, other SBA programs, other private lending programs that are available, the mechanics of the governor's reopening plan. We've got some FAQs about how unemployment works. And so we've shifted a lot of staff to be able to provide that level of support to businesses when they need it. So, you know, there's been a lot that has been done to try to, you know, first focus on the businesses that we already have in the state and make sure that we're taking care of them. So those efforts will continue. I think you will see a lot more that will be coming as we implement the distribution of the CARES Act money. So the state received $1.25 billion out of the CARES Act. 115 million of that went to Johnson County because it has a population of over 500,000, and about 100 million went to Sedgwick County because it also has a population of over 500,000. Those are the thresholds set by the feds. The rest of the billion goes to the state to be distributed by the governor for recovery-related activities. And so you may have heard that governor established the recovery office that will be running that process. The chair of, or the executive director of the recovery office is Cheryl Harrison Lee, who just started last week. She was previously the city administrator in Gardner, but she has a broad background in local government management from Florida, and she's very good. And then we also have a board of directors of this recovery office that is chaired by Lyle Butler, who for many years was the head of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. And they'll be announcing the rest of that board, I think next week, very soon. And so they will be administering those dollars, and there'll be a lot of announcements that come throughout the summer. And I'm really hopeful about what that means for supporting the state's existing businesses as well as supporting our recruitment efforts.
Thank you, Secretary. This next question is from Edwardsville City Manager Mike Webb. How does the state opening for cosmologists and barbers versus Wyco Restart plan? So how does the state plan overlay over the local Restart Wyco plan?
You know, I should have done my homework on how phase 1.5 compares to the Wyco plan. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared on that question, but we will follow up on that now and get that to Daniel. I'm sorry, I should know that.
No worries. And I think one of the questions that we continue to have here locally as the governor has implemented her plan is we kind of go back and forth on which plan trumps the other. And as we understand it, the governor's plan becomes the baseline. So local municipalities cannot have less restrictive plans in place, but can be more restrictive locally. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is 100% accurate. So the governor's plan is the minimum. If counties wish to be more restrictive, they can do that. Kansas is a home rule state, and in that spirit, counties can make that decision on their own to be more restrictive. They cannot be less restrictive, though, than the governor's order.
Thank you for that. Okay, we have a question from Commissioner Philbrook. Would you please address workforce centers and unemployment?
Sure. So our workforce centers are open and by appointment. We're providing our services by phone and virtually. So either chat or like this on Zoom. So we're really working to staff up to make sure that our workforce centers can handle the incoming flood of people that are seeking work. And frankly, we've also got quite a bit of hiring that's going on by a handful of companies that are involved in logistics, e-commerce, distribution, as well as supermarkets and a lot. There have been a lot of jobs created in portions of the retail sector that are related to food. And so our workforce centers are key to that response. And I've been meeting regularly with Mike Bean, who's the State's Director of Workforce Services here at Commerce, to make sure that we are ready. I would anticipate that the physical centers, depending on how things go with the COVID numbers, but we're planning that probably it'll be in June when the physical centers reopen, and we'll be able to get back to a new normal to handle that volume. But we are preparing for that flood of workers, particularly if you look at, under the CARES Act, there's the additional $600 in unemployment benefits that's been made available. That $600 ends in late July. And so about the beginning of July is when we think the numbers are going to dramatically ramp up in terms of people seeking employment. And so we are determined to be ready and to have reasonable wait times and to provide services through different media. So, it's not just on the phone, but our online chat feature is something that we had launched back in November. And I'm so glad that we did, because that's been able to take a lot of the pressure off and keep our wait times down for those who need our services. So we're doing okay so far. We're ramping up for the summer, and it's going to be a wild ride, but I think we're ready for it.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat box. It's a little lengthy, so I'm going to let her ask it. Nalima with Snap IT Solutions, can you go ahead and ask your question to the Secretary?
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. This question is with regards to help for small, medium businesses that are not tech-oriented. Will state consider partnering with tech companies so we can help small businesses go, at least part of their operations go virtual, and give them tools and train them on virtual tools? Will that be something that you would consider?
Yes, we would, Nalima. It's good to see you too. Yes. Right now, we have an environment where, as far as I'm concerned, everything is on the table in terms of what we need to do to be creative to support our state's businesses. And so if that is, if providing support for virtual services or for virtual workplaces is part of what's needed, then absolutely we're willing to talk about that and figure out how we do it. A crisis like this creates the opportunity to do things differently in ways that maybe aren't possible in a normal environment. And that's because the situation necessitates working differently. And so by all means, I would be very happy to have that conversation, and I will have Abby reach out to you directly, Nalima, to talk about that, and we'll get something set.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, but coming through this, we have to become stronger as a community, stronger as a business, and really ready for the next technology era. So we would love to have the conversation. Thank you.
I might add one more thing on that. So the new KDOT transportation bill, the Eisenhower plan, includes in it $5 million a year that can be used to leverage investments in broadband. And, you know, $5 million isn't a ton of money when you're talking about this, but what that provides is some seed capital and the ability to leverage federal grants that can be significantly larger. And so we've got our broadband director, Stan Adams, working on figuring out how we can get those dollars ready to go so that when the new fiscal year starts on July 1, we're ready to make some of those investments in the broadband infrastructure in the state that is going to be needed in addition to what we're talking about here with individual workplaces. You got to have the access. So it's about a lot of things, but we've got that $5 million coming and it's going to help.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I don't see any more questions in the chat box, but at this point, we'd like to open up the floor. If you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and give us your name and title, and then or company you work with, and then ask your question. Questions from the floor.
Hey, Daniel, this is Joab. Good afternoon, Secretary Toland. This is Joab Ortiz with Burns & McDonnell. Question for you, which is, you know, as you've talked a lot about the different projects and programs and things that are taking place right now in Topeka, interested in what chamber, what businesses could be doing, you know, to support the action and activities of the state. I see a lot of things that we're asking for. What can we do to help get this thing moving forward from a state perspective?
That's a great question, Joab. Thank you. So the most important thing that we need at the state is data about what's going on in local communities. We get a lot of high-level reports on, you know, here's the statewide unemployment numbers. We can look at it by county and so forth. But there are often, it's kind of like microclimates that exist in different communities where conditions might be different and where businesses have a different need or a different opportunity. I need to know that. And this is not something that is about Wyandotte County, but it is about other counties where we don't have as much information. You know, we've got great relationships with everybody, I feel like in Wyandotte County, so that people feel comfortable about picking up the phone or sending a text or an email about something they've heard or seen or something they think we should know. But I guess I would just encourage that to continue and for you to just keep the information coming to us. We really do our best to listen and to know what's going on, but you know, sometimes the volume can, it gets constricted when local communities are just focused on, oh my gosh, how am I gonna get through this right now? Once you get through whatever it is, we want you to share that information with us. What were the lessons learned that you had? Are there things that you need from the state that that we may not know about yet? Please share that with us. Share it with you know, you can go directly to me or you can work with our field reps who are around the state. Go through the chamber, whatever works for you, just keep that information coming. That's what we need.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the floor?
So this is Joab. I'll have a follow-up to that question. With regard to the data that you're looking at, and I apologize, I wasn't on the first few minutes of the call, but one of the things that I know that I heard from several of our board members was the concern about going from 1 to 2 to adding the 1.5, and I think it caught some folks a little flat-footed. Was there specific data that you were looking at that required us to slow that down? Was there something in particular that we need to be cognizant of?
So the medical determinations that that led to phase 1.5 That all comes out of the Department of Health and Environment, and so they have been the ones advising on what's medically appropriate, what's in the best interest of public health on this. I don't know the precise metrics that they used in order to make the determination that we would go to phase 1.5 versus phase 2. The governor has been clear from the start, though, that this phased plan is one that will require there to be continued improvement in key health metrics in order to move from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and to the end. And so, you know, part of what makes this challenging is that as we've improved our testing capability as a state, we've gotten more test kits in, we've got better infrastructure to test people, that drives the numbers up. You know, we've been able to better understand the severity of the problem in the state. And so where we had lacked some data before, we've got a fuller picture now. And so what you see with phase 1.5 is a reflection of what we've learned and continue to learn as we get more data about the spread of COVID in our state.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Erler, do you care to jump in with your question that you just dropped in the chat box? You may be on mute, sir.
Dan, why don't you go ahead or
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read it. Doesn't look like you can come in. Your mic might be turned off. Mr. Erler's asking, you spoke of the banking community earlier. Do you hear anything about initiatives in processing faster payments?
Would those be faster payments coming from SBA on PPP loans and EIDL? Oh.
Not sure if he can hear us here. Yeah, his audio might be off on his computer, so.
Well, let me do my best to answer it. So, so the banking community, so the banks are the intermediary on PPP loans that go to SBA, applications that go to SBA. SBA has improved their processing time on PPP loans and on EIDL loans. There was about a 4-week period where they didn't do any EIDL loans at all. So they've now shifted, and that's improved quite a bit. With PPP loans, the rate of new applications has slowed down dramatically. There's still $100 billion that's available, or a little north of $100 billion that's available in PPP capacity at SBA. And we think that some of that is, you know, as the national and state economies have started to reopen, there simply isn't as much demand for those dollars. So what I would encourage everybody to do, if they haven't already made application for PPP or EIDL and they've been thinking about it, go, you know, if you need it, go for it. Talk with your bank, get your application in, get in line to make sure that you get those dollars before they run out. You could probably get the best information about the exact processing time from your bank when you go in and visit with them, because they will have been making application for lots of different customers, and they should have a good sense of, you know, what it is day by day. So I hope, Mr. Erler, that captured your question. And if it didn't, you can, oh, yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I have a question around these sports venues. So as you know, we have Speedway, Baseball Park, T-Bones, and Sporting KC. You know, what do you see, what's in the future for them? What's on the horizon for them? The Speedway just postponed their upcoming race. Sporting KC is kind of waiting to hear from MLS in terms of what they can and cannot do. What's your feeling, or what are you hearing from the governor on this piece?
Well, I think the key on sporting, on Speedway, is probably going to be about what do the leagues wind up doing as a whole. So, MLS has got to figure out how do they navigate across the landscape of teams that are in very different places across the country. Each place has a different governor with different standards. They've got different COVID infection rates in different states. And so I would anticipate that the key driver on our professional sports is going to be not what happens at the state level, but it's really going to be about what the leagues decide. If you look at the NBA, which isn't relevant to Kansas or Kansas City, but if you look at as a league, they were among the first to cancel their season, and they did that at the league level, and that's what you've seen across professional sports. So that's what I'm expecting, Daniel, as you look at large-scale sporting entertainment venues.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the floor for the secretary? Okay, Secretary, any closing remarks for the group?
Well, I want to thank all the members that are on the call today for taking the time to be here. But more importantly, I want to thank you for your perseverance through this incredibly difficult time. I know all of you have had to make difficult decisions, and that this is nothing short of a nightmare. And we are doing everything that we can at the state, here at the Department of Commerce, to be as responsive, as helpful, as supportive as we can possibly be. And, we are trying to work at the speed of business, not at the speed of government, to provide that support. And so we are trying to be also a learning organization. And so again, if you have suggestions, if you have concerns, if you've heard a rumor and you don't know what's real or not, please reach out. You can reach out through your local chamber, economic development professionals. You can reach out directly. My email, this goes straight to me, is david.toland, TOLAND, @ks.gov. I will respond. I do my best to keep up with the volume, which has been pretty high lately, but we will get back to you. And even if it's not the answer you want, at least we will get you an answer. So that's the culture we're trying to create. That's the kind of responsiveness that our state's businesses and communities and residents deserve. And that's what we'll always strive to do. So we wish you all the best. I know I'll be back again soon. Daniel will, probably need to do this in a couple months again, I would anticipate. So it's very important to me that we stay in close contact with everything that's going on in Kansas City and Wyandotte County. And so thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Secretary. And on behalf of the KCK Chamber Board of Directors, staff, and all of our members, really appreciate you being so open and engaging with us. This open line of communication is very critical. So we definitely appreciate your support and your partnership. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.